Hello and welcome to Hindsighting, where we discuss all the movies to win the Best Picture Oscar and try to figure out if this picture truly is the best or is time rendered a different verdict. I'm Edward Clow. My guest today is a lifelong Miamian and co-founder of the Emmy, Peabody, and Edward R. Murrow winning production company Raconteur. He's directed such documentaries as Raw Deal, A Question of Consent, the Cocaine Cowboys franchise, including the Netflix hit The King of Miami, the HBO original doc 537 Votes, executive produced by Adam McKay, God Forbid, the sex scandal that brought down a dynasty, which was the most watched doc in Hulu history, From Russia with Lev, with executive producer Rachel Maddow, and this year's Toronto Film Festival world premiere, Cancelled, the Paula Deen story, as well as the ESPN 30 for 30s, The U, Broke, and The U Part 2. He hosts the weekly Because Miami podcast on Dan Le Batard's Meadowlark Network. I think we're already out of time after all that stuff. But Billy Corben, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me, Ed.
Today, we're hindsighting the best picture of 2005, Crash. From 6 nominations, it also won Oscars for Best Original Screenplay and Best Editing. It was nominated against Brokeback Mountain, Capote, Good Night and Good Luck, and Munich. So, Billy, before we get to Crash proper, the mini project of this first season of hindsighting is we've been talking about the 2000s. Our first episode was Gladiator, and we've gone 1, 2, 3 all the way through that, which brings us to today's episode, Crash. And our episode puts us right in the middle of the 2000s. So what I've been asking all my guests, it's been kind of an informal poll, and I've gotten a wide variety of answers, is the thesis that I want to disprove, or at least interrogate, is I think that the 2000s was the worst decade for movies that I've lived through. I'm not going to say for all time, because I haven't seen everything in the 50s and 60s and stuff, but just as far as what I've lived through, and what I'm basing it on mainly is that it was not as good as the 90s and it was not as good as the 2010s. So the decades on either side of it, it was just demonstrably weaker. And I think there are a couple reasons for it, and I want to get your take on this. One is 9/11. I'm not saying this is George W. Bush's fault. I just think that there's an industry-wide kind of feeling that people don't want to see anything serious or challenging, and that's strongest in 2003. Now, the second half of this decade does show some signs of life. We're kind of right in the middle. I also think, and then I'll throw it to you, that while we're still having a lot of independent films, in my opinion, and this is completely opinion-based, not data-based, we're just seeing fewer independent movies that I'm responding to. We're not seeing filmmakers like Tarantino and Soderbergh and or even Christopher Nolan, who pops at the beginning of this decade. And these are guys who are now mainstream filmmakers. So my question is, what do you feel about the 2000s? Just generally speaking, how did you feel the 2000s were for movies?
Well, the first thing I would say is there's probably, if we're going to break it down by decade, because that's what we do. But
sure,
at the same time, also there are, it takes several years for things to kind of adjust, obviously.
Sure.
And there are factors, I think, artistically and corporately, if that's a term, that occurred that were the cause of this. But I think it's safe to say I revisit movies of that decade a lot less than I revisit movies of the 90s or even the 2010s.
Okay.
Like, as far as things that I'm interested in, as far as rewatchability, as far as shit that was just plain sticky, which is part of the, I watched this movie that we're talking about today, and I haven't really thought about it since since I rewatched it. And there are memorable things in it, and there are certainly things that stay with me, but I also just, it kind of just went in one ear and out the other. But I think the major, if you think about Disney buying Miramax in 93, Miramax still had some inertia. That wasn't the end of Miramax. It still, it still did its thing. It still had the projects that were in play, that were in development, that were in production. So the rest of that plays out. The golden age of Miramax plays out through the end of the 90s. But that consolidation of media, like you were saying, the kind of the diminishing of the truly independent film. And then I think something else happens in the late 90s and then into the 2000s, the golden age of television. And if you watch a movie like the one we're going to talk about today, it plays more like television, actually. Like
Yeah.
it plays more like like a dramatic ensemble 1 hour HBO kind of drama, like a lesser The Wire, in LA instead of Baltimore,
Mhm.
so I think that's really what happened, is that TV got so good, the investment in TV got so much more considerable. Not like now, but you started to see bigger actors more interested in doing television thanks to premium cable and basic cable. So I think that's what happened, is that a lot of the talent and a lot of the audience's eyeballs for like drama, not for spectacle,
Yeah.
tentpole, special effects driven, comic book shit or whatever, but like for movies like this, indie film, as I guess we're kind of using the term. That's what happened. TV happened,
Yeah.
in a big way, I think, in that decade.
Yeah, and you know what? That's incredibly astute, and I think in these last 5 or 6 episodes, I'm gonna bring TV into it because I just didn't think about that. Because you're right, because in 2002, well, we get The Sopranos in the late '90s, and The Sopranos,
Yeah,
whatever you think
90,
about.
99. That's
Yeah,
a game changer. What Scorsese did in feature films
right.
were suddenly on HBO every week, and it was brilliant.
Yeah, and in the same year, in 2002, I don't know what order it's in, but I know it's the same year we get the first episode of The Wire and the first episode of The Shield. And
Right.
those are 2 cop shows, if you wanna be reductive, but when you watch them, I always say that, like, The Wire is like The Godfather in terms of the scope and the pace, but The Shield is like Goodfellas, and
The
sometimes you
Shield's
want.
a masterpiece, and I think underrated, and I don't like not forgotten, but I think definitely way underappreciated.
I agree. I think it's a little bit lost. I think that Walter White and Tony Soprano have a little bit overshadowed Vic Mackey as a truly despicable anti-hero that's still compelling. Well, that's, you know what, I think that's a great, very astute point, is that, yeah, TV happens. So let's move on to Crash, but I want to throw a few stats first, just some Oscar stats. Paul Haggis, the writer director of this movie, holds the distinction of being the only person ever to write the screenplay for 2 consecutive Best Picture winners, because he also wrote Million Dollar Baby, which we covered last week. This was the lowest grossing Best Picture Oscar winner since The Last Emperor in 1987. This is the first Best Picture film since Rocky to only win 3 Oscars. I mentioned Toronto in your intro. This is the first film from a festival, Toronto, to win Best Picture at the Oscars. This is the only Best Picture winner that was released before the previous year's Best Picture winner, which was Million Dollar Baby. So what happened was that Crash premiered at Toronto, which is where it technically premieres. It does not get released until 2005. In between, Million Dollar Baby is made, released, and wins Best Picture. So it's just a release thing, but it's just kind of a funny thing that I'm not saying will never happen again, but it's kind of a funny thing. This is the last film to win Best Picture without winning Best Director until Coda in 2021. That's a real long run there. This is one of 2 Best Picture Oscar winners whose title only has 1 syllable, the other being Wings in 1927, which is, of course, the very first movie to win the Best Picture Oscar, and we will cover that on this show. Billy, this stat made me laugh, and I think you'll appreciate this. So when I asked you to do Crash, you said, "Oh, I've been wanting to see that movie again because I love car crashes." And you made a joke about it being the night.
I was stunned that a film that I didn't remember, a movie won Best Picture that had James Spader having intercourse with Rosanna Arquette's leg wound. I was really shocked. And if that's not the movie we're talking about today, we might have to record tomorrow, because I watched that movie this week 3 times, Ed. Actually, 3 times.
Well,
You only need to watch it once or twice, but I watched it 3 times, Ed.
you do the Lord's work. You understand the assignment. So Billy laid out what the 1997 Crash is about, and what's funny about that is that
I don't think I did, Ed. I don't think I did. I'd love to hear I'd love to hear how you're going to describe it.
well, I took my friends to see Crash back in 1997, and they all went with me. I was a freshman in college, and none of them knew what we were in for, myself included. And I'd been reading about it, and at the end, it was held over me the entire time. My friend of mine said, when we saw LA Confidential like 8 months later, he's like, "All right, Ed, you redeemed yourself for Crash." Like, that was a good movie, but we didn't trust you after the Crash debacle. I was like, I'm sorry, guys. But anyway, so to this point, this is a fascinating stat that this is certainly not going to come up again. This movie is often brought up in legal discussions about copyright principles to illustrate the fact that titles are not subject to protection under U.S. copyright law. So Crash and Crash have the same title, but because they have completely different subject matter, you can't copyright a title. Yeah, there's 2 crashes, and if anyone listening along watched the David Cronenberg movie, um, you know, that's an interesting movie too. Maybe we can compare them. But, a couple more stats, and then we'll get into it.
By the way, but I should say both Crashes I had not seen since the theater.
Yeah,
So
I haven't either.
I obviously revisited the 05 one for the purpose of this, but I've never revisited the Cronenberg movie to my recollection.
I have not either. And that movie probably deserves its own pod. There's probably a Crash cast somewhere, like a Crash pod. At 1 hour and 52 minutes, this is number 17 in ascending length. Number 18 if you count Sunrise, which we'll litigate if that even counts in a later episode. It is number 43 on the box office list of best pictures with a worldwide gross of $101 million. So, Billy, normally what I ask at this point in the show is, what is your previous relationship with this movie? I'm not going to ask that here. One, you've already kind of alluded to it, but I think this movie, really is a very special episode for a reason I'm going to get to right now. This movie begs a far more interesting question. And before I get to that question, I want to read just a couple snippets of some reviews that I pulled from Letterboxd. Are you on Letterboxd, Billy?
I just started after the Toronto Film Festival.
Okay. So Letterboxd is something I've only been on since December, so I'm only a couple months ahead of you. Every time I watch a movie, regardless of what I think about it, I go right on the Letterboxd, and it's really the only sort of, to even call it social media is a stretch. It's really the only sort of social media-like thing I'm engaging with currently. Because it's all the things about Twitter that I love. It's like the insightful, smart-ass, movie commentary. But every time I've watched a movie before this podcast, I have dipped onto Letterboxd to see what people thought. But this is the first time that I'm actually quoting Letterboxd users, and it might be the last, but it's instructed to the question we're going to get to in a second. So, a couple quotes about Crash, the 2005 one. Connor Zudelmo wrote, "Love Actually, but for racism." H wrote, "This movie makes Green Book." Yeah, that's great. A user named H wrote, "This movie makes Green Book look like Parasite." Double score H for using 2 Best Picture comps. That, as the host of this show, I really appreciate that. The Seed Bearer wrote, The Seed Bearer wrote, "You just know the parents in Get Out fucking love this movie." Evan Raymond Gunvirus Pincus wrote, "The movie that taught America how to talk about race, unfortunately." Jamie Rebanal wrote, "If All Lives Matter was a movie, this would be it." Now this quote makes sense, Billy, because you've explained what the 97 Crash is about. So Alan wrote, "The most bizarre film called Crash, and that's a feat in itself, as the other one's about symphorophilia." Last one, Bombsfall wrote, "I was racist until I saw it." So here's my question.
Somebody tells me this is not the last time you're going to quote Letterboxd on this show.
This is the last time I'm going to quote it. What's interesting, and this is a quick thing about Letterboxd, its score is a 3.0, which is actually pretty good. Just to give you an idea, if people don't know, like the highest rated movie on Letterboxd, it used to be a movie called Harikari, which is at like a 4.6. I think like Godfather 2, which makes sense, is like the highest rated. So that's like the most 5-star reviews. Which makes sense. Godfather 2 is about what you would think. So here's my question, though, Billy. And again, this is a question I'm only going to ask you probably on this show. At least I think so as of now. I have not seen all 97 Best Picture winners. I know you haven't either. I have 31 to go. But having seen all the Best Picture winners does not matter because what we're talking about is a reputation. So here's my question. Is Crash the most infamous Best Picture winner of all? I'm not saying the worst. I'm saying, is it the one with the most infamous reputation of all 97 of these movies? What do you think?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. Honestly, I think that the movie is less problematic than two white guys talking about the movie on a podcast, to tell you the truth.
Well, here, you know what's funny? I had that issue when I was booking this episode,
Yeah, I
but
think
but
much more apropos to talk with a woman or a person of color about this movie, particularly as it relates to its problematic reputation,
mm,
which to me, in watching it, doesn't really endure. Um, again, if I had watched it, this is me watching it 20 years after I first saw it in the theater.
me too.
If I had revisited it 10 years ago in the interim, I might have had a very different reaction to it at the 10-year mark than I am at the 20-year mark. And I think that's because our mores as a society and where we are historically, for better or worse, mind you, evolve and devolve in such a way that it impacts obviously how we perceive this art. But I don't know. I think there are. I would have to think there are Best Picture winners that people think either less of or are just as shocked, if not disappointed, about them having. Well, I mean, a lot of people. I loved Nora, but a lot of people give that shit for having for being the Best Picture of the year, for example. I think that'll have a certain amount of infamy moving forward. Obviously, we're talking about something that just happened, this year. But I don't know. I think there's certain I mean, Birdman. I don't think trying to think of things that
American Beauty is one that people.
American Beauty. There's another one. Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
Again, that like is totally problematic for myriad reasons.
Right.
At this point, by the way, I think it's a good movie, not a great movie.
Right.
Do I think it was the Best Picture of that year? I highly doubt it. While I haven't dove into or dived into 2000, like, I would be very surprised to that if that were the case.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean. But by the way, reputationally, you might be right, but like, I just watched it and I don't get it.
Yeah, I think reputationally is what my question is, and as far as the two white guys talking about it, I did have pause about that because one, I want my guest palette to be diverse, but how I settled on it being okay is one, I wanted to talk to you about this movie, but also two white guys wrote this movie, so I think that
Totally.
yeah. So and
it shows it.
Well, that's something. I think the thing is two-pronged because I think for some people, a lot of the vitriol for this movie comes down to, oh, this beat Brokeback Mountain. But I don't know how big a piece that plays for a lot of people because one thing that I've discovered on this podcast, even talking with filmmakers, is that a lot of people, even in industry, forget, like my first guest, Joe Russo, forgot that Saving Private Ryan didn't win Best Picture. I wanted to start with those letterbox reviews, and it's not like that's a definitive word, but
no. By the way, I think they're very funny, and I think they're very accurate.
Sure.
I also think that there was a, I like, I'm one of the outliers who likes Casino better than Goodfellas.
Yes.
In no small part because Casino is not just about the characters and the story; it's about the city and the rise and fall and renaissance of this city. Which Goodfellas is not about New York. Goodfellas is about those characters.
Agreed.
But I like the micro macro of Casino, and this has that vibe too. It's about like The Wire does. It's a mosaic, and when you zoom out, each of those individual tiles and characters and stories, creates the portrait of this. You zoom out and there's LA. That's what we try to do with Cocaine Cowboys too. It's like, It's not just about these individual characters or cocaine. It's about how Miami was built, by narco dollars in the 80s. And so I appreciate the ambition. And this is definitely a construct of 90s indie film of the intersecting ensembles and the mystery of how they interconnect kind of coming together and, in various revelations and at the end. And I was surprised actually at how much of it I did remember because I don't remember shit. I was surprised at how much of it I recalled or came back to me when watching it, and some of it was, you know, um, slightly surprising
Yeah.
as well. But I just like, and I enjoyed its brevity as
I
as well.
completely agree. I think this was a very easy sit. I think that a lot of the movies that we've covered that I like better were still, you know, tougher sits. And when this ended, I knew just in my prep that it was an hour and 52 minutes, but I had forgotten. And when it was ending, I was like, all right, like we'll get to this in a little bit. Maybe it deserves the best editing Oscar that it won. I mean,
Yeah,
Fast
that,
is
that's a really interesting.
yeah,
Uh, uh,
we'll talk about that in a little bit later in the show format wise, but it
I do want to say that I also I did this, which I'm sure you didn't do with Return of the King. I did this in one sitting, and I was determined to rewatch it in one sitting because I wanted
mhm,
that. I didn't want to treat it like television. I didn't want to, I wanted to binge it. I wanted,
yeah,
I didn't want to. I did, with the exception of like the bathroom break, a
yeah,
pause.
yeah,
I watched it in one and like scheduled my,
yeah,
my week around, around that, and because I thought it was important to experience it that way. And honestly, storyline wise, and I never watched the Stars series that I think also lasted a couple of seasons. But
nor I.
honestly, this is probably one of those. I rarely say this about anything, that it would be better longer.
Mm,
But this is kind of one of those things where I was like, you know what, this might actually have been better as
mm,
like a 1 hour dramatic ensemble series that went on for a little bit longer, or a season or two or whatever. Because not because I was so enjoying the world building, like I think of one of the few movies I thought that of was, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I was like, oh,
yes,
I just want to live here longer. I wish this were like 10 1 hour episodes on Netflix, where I could just stay, because I enjoyed the world building and the exquisite period design, the art direction, and the ensemble. Where there was minor characters that were utterly intriguing who came and went. And not that they would have been more interesting in more scenes, but I wouldn't have minded spending more time with them. This isn't quite like
yes.
that, like that, but I feel like it would have. It might have actually increased the drama and tension, and the intention of the filmmakers in terms of what they were looking to accomplish.
Yeah, a couple things that I want to respond to. One, I did watch this in one sitting. I watch all these movies in one sitting, with the exception of bathroom breaks, including Lord of the Rings: Return of the King.
Jesus.
I do this for you, dear listeners. I want to simulate as much as possible the theatrical experience. It's not. It's a percentile thing. I want to get to 99%, 98%. So, I every movie that I cover here, I am going to watch in one sitting. Lord of the Rings, it was particularly challenging because that movie's 3 hours and 21 minutes, but I did it. I have a lot of 3-hour movies in my future, a lot of 3-hour plus movies in my future. That's one of the reasons we're talking about pace and brevity and editing is, in my stats, I list of all the movies, the length. I have a list of that I got off IMDb, the list of all the Oscar winners in length. And so I know that the longest one is Gone with the Wind, as you would expect, which is just a minute or two under 4 hours. The shortest one is Marty, which is 90 minutes. And then everything is in between. So the length is obviously something that's on my mind. One, because I have to sort of schedule these things. And I think half of these fucking things are 2 hours and 40 minutes plus. Again, Lawrence of Arabia, Gandhi, Schindler's List, Titanic, on and on. These things that you just know are long movies, putting aside what you think about them. Yeah, I didn't watch the Stars show, but I think this definitely lends itself to television. I think the two things that it's compared about, putting aside the racial steps or missteps in this, I think one of the issues I have with this movie, I do applaud its ambition. I mean, obviously, you and I are both fans of Robert Altman's Shortcuts. I think Shortcuts for us is a bigger thing than Nashville, but Nashville was the first one of those. So this is Altman-esque. It's like Hitchcockian. When you say Altman-esque, you're talking about a tapestry of characters, an ensemble, no clear lead, intersecting characters. Um, a more recent example that worked, it was of course Magnolia, the PTA movie, which was the only thing, which a lot of people criticize is not all those stories working. But I think Paul Haggis probably saw Magnolia, which was only 5 years before this, six. I think that was probably because that Magnolia also takes place in Los Angeles, also takes place in the Valley. Most of this movie, as an Angelino, is in the Valley. So I think in the
Also,
beginning,
it strikes me. I'm familiar, but certainly less familiar with LA than I am with Miami, and I'm a real stickler about my quote unquote Miami movies,
sure,
particularly ones that are actually shot here, because many of them are not,
yeah,
and the accuracy of the geography, which is almost 0%. It struck me that this was pretty geographically accurate. That when
yes,
they mentioned there being in a particular
they're there,
neighborhood, I was looking at topography and streets,
yeah.
and it looked pretty. It was pretty accurate, I thought.
It was very accurate. They're on Ventura. They're in the Valley. The Terrence Howard character is, I think, he's working on the Radford Law. I don't know if they actually might be something they kind of faked. I mean, it's worth mentioning is that this was a a real independent movie with not a big budget and all these actors. Because there's even not even looking back. I mean, Michael Pena is the one actor who was ironically, I think, on The Shield while this came out. But he's one of the only ones who you look back on and be like, oh, yeah, he wasn't known then. Everyone else are people that we already knew. In terms of Sandra Bullock, Matt Dillon, Ryan Phillippe, Tondeway Newton, like these are all people that like maybe they weren't big stars, but they were familiar faces. And that's
And both of Marvel's War Machines.
I didn't make that
Yes,
connection. Oh, Don Cheadle.
right.
Oh my God.
Yes,
Who's a producer
who
on this too. Totally did not make that connect. We're never
yes,
far from Marvel.
who replaced Terrence Howard in the Marvel Cinematic
Yeah.
universe.
Yes.
As
Yes.
Rhodey. So
No, that's so fun. You know what? That's just like on our second episode where we were covering A Beautiful Mind, and my guest John Steinfeld pointed out that Anthony Rapp and Adam Goldberg were also in Dazed and Confused, and were together in that movie.
uh-huh.
And it was like that just blew my mind. It was right in front of
I
me.
think, but I think we did. We haven't really rattled it off, but the cast is stacked
Yes.
in this movie, and it's essential because this is, as you were talking about, Altman-esque, and these are the kinds of greater than the sum of their parts movies. That like sort
Absolutely.
of, but at the same time, if you took any one of these scenes, because there's some really well written scenes in this movie and relationships in this movie that even if you were to pull the thread, like in Shortcuts, they'd be really intriguing shorts, or plays. Or one act plays, but Don Cheadle, Sandra Bullock, Brendan Fraser, Thandie Newton, Matt Dillon, Terrence Howard, Loretta Devine, even William Fichtner, who I love. I love when he pops.
He's great in this.
But also great in this, Lorenz Tate. Obviously, you mentioned Michael Pena, but like Jennifer Esposito,
Yeah.
is fantastic in this. You have Ludacris,
Yeah.
is really good in this. Like again, the wisecracking black carjackers. Spoiler alert. like again, definitely written by white men. Definitely like an emulation of like the high IQ hitmen of the '90s that Tarantino really revolutionized. But the performances are still really, for whatever you might think of the writing in some of the scenes, the performances are uniformly superb.
Well, I want to get to that because you touched on a bunch of things that I want to get to. Because I want to talk about the movie, but you're touching on like two or three things that I think I wrote down a lot. So I think that the storyline that most intrigued me, and this can't be solved editorially because if you were to cut the other ones, you'd have like a 20-minute movie. But just looking at this as a screenplay, there are two or three stories in this that I think are really interesting that could have and maybe should have been their own movie and still could have been about race and all the things they were talking about. But I think the story and the performances in the movie that I think are strongest are Matt Dillon, Thandeway Newton, and Terrence Howard. I think the scene where he pulls her over, even though the writing, if you were to read it, might be a little forced, I think the performances in that scene are really strong. Matt Dillon is the only actor in this movie to be nominated for an Oscar, And I think it's actually really deserved because I think he, in every scene, is so embodying this character. And Dylan's a funny case because I think like, you know, he he hasn't gotten a Tarantino or a Coen's brother or PTA putting him in a movie and kind of reviving his career. I thought this was going to be that because he is nominated for an Oscar. And I think that so few directors know how to use him. Like the director who used him best was actually Francis Ford Coppola in the two S.E. Hinton movies. I think that Dylan is just such a
and I think Gus Van Sant.
yes, another one in Drugstore Cowboy and To Die For.
To Die For.
Yeah, he's terrific in To Die For. And that's such a great movie.
Perfectly cast.
Perfectly cast. Yeah, because in To Die For, it's like he's like kind of a lug, but like he's still kind of a sweet guy. And so it's like he's
that was a best supporting actor nomination worthy performance as well.
And again, in a movie with a young Joaquin Phoenix, a young Casey Affleck, and that was a big movie for Nicole Kidman. But
brilliant movie.
Yeah, a great movie. But I think that the scenario of him pulling over this black couple was one of the few things in this movie that situationally I'm like, yeah, that's what would happen. And the way that the Terrence Howard character is humiliated watching his wife get sexually assaulted, and even the Ryan Phillippe character who doesn't say a word in this, him having his ambivalence about it, and the fallout from that, where they go home and get in this argument, Tandaway Newton and Terrence Howard, and you see both sides of it. She's like, why didn't you defend me? And he's like, what the fuck do you want me to do? I'm a black man. There's a cop. Like, I don't want to get shot. This is relevant 20 years later.
I will tell you that more often than not, watching the movie, following a Thandie Newton, Terrence Howard scene, I would remark on how well written I thought those scenes were.
I agree.
And I think you're right. If you pull that a thread, it's probably the most vivid, realistic, and relevant arc of the entire movie. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think if he had just said, if Paul Haggis was a friend of mine and he showed me the script, I'd say, look, this storyline is really, really interesting. Let this breathe, focus on this, and you can still tell the story that you want to tell about race, about inequality, about the dynamics of Los Angeles. You're just going to be focusing on, just this black versus white. And I understand he was trying to, LA is a very multicultural city. Everybody's here. And I understand what the ambition is something I understand and can appreciate. But I just think that those scenes threw cold water on a lot of the other scenes. But so that's the thing I wrote down is this movie better if it's about these three people? And you could still have Terrence Howard have that interaction with Tony Danza, which I think is another scene that's at a register that I think kind of works for this movie. The Tony Danza character, it's like, can you make?
I know we're not allowed to say this anymore, but like that is one of the probably most vivid examples in drama, particularly written by white men, like of this era. I don't mean now when we have more diversity, another word we're not allowed to say anymore, in writers and directors and storytellers on film and television, but of a microaggression that I've ever seen. That scene with Tony Danza, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah,
even as just a play, as a little scene. Like, I thought it was a really intriguing, and of course, in the arc and deterioration of Terrence Howard's character's emotional state and the fallout, as you put it, from the traffic stop. Now, mind you, if you challenged me and said pick the one thread or the one storyline that would make it the best standalone feature, I would certainly, there's no doubt about it, I would pick that one. But also, I don't know that if you were to triple the running time or quintuple the running time or quadruple the running time of that storyline, it would feel to me like diminishing returns.
Sure. Well,
because these ensembles really are, like we said, in the Altman-esque world, greater than the sum of their parts. And you were right. Other scenes pale in this movie in comparison to how well written and acted those scenes are. But like, I don't know that I'd want to sit through a whole
Yeah, it
movie
would. No,
about that.
it's a teardown, and I'm not saying that's necessarily the answer. Well, just sticking with the Tony Danza thing for a second, because it is well written, and I think Danza and Howard play it so well because he isn't like just saying it's a subtle thing, and that's the kind of microaggression that probably happens. And
But we should probably, for the benefit of the audience, Terrence Howard is a television
director,
director. Tony Danza seems to be like the showrunner or sort of like writer EP or something of the show. And
yeah,
we never get to see, we see the cast on the set. The scene begins with them having just
wrapped.
wrapped and they're walking away, and Tony Danza is like the EP writer showrunner character approaches Terrence Howard as the director and says that like it's like looks like a Cosby Show style black family sitcom.
Black cast, yeah.
Yeah, and he's talking about how like the younger actor on it is like sounding quote less black,
right,
end quote, and he's not reading the dialogue the way it's written in a in a Huck Finn vernacular, like
right.
in the way the writers intended it, and want him to reshoot it with a blacker performance. And in the context of what's happening in that storyline, it's uniquely intense.
Right.
Yeah, and the way he says to him, "You're the expert." I mean,
Yeah.
it's just really, again, like, I know we're not allowed to say it, but microaggression. And it's a fucking and you
Say it on this show.
Terrence Howard, who once again, just like when his wife is being sexually assaulted during a traffic stop by a police officer, he can't say anything,
right?
Because his life, liberty, livelihood is on the line.
Yes.
So he has to sit there and clench his jaw, and he is powerful, man. In the in that scene.
He's terrific, and it's worth noting that this same year, Howard is Oscar nominated for Hustle and Flow.
Another fabulous movie and performance.
Also interesting, written and directed by a white guy. So I'm not saying that white filmmakers can't talk about. I want to be clear that I'm not saying that like if you're a white filmmaker that you can't be writing about races other than your own. That's not at all. But to kind of pivot a little bit. So I
want to say, because I haven't said this yet, and I should have said it at the top. I was surprised, pleasantly so, at how much I didn't not like this movie.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because I was dreading it. I had plenty of time to do this homework for you on this show, on this pod, and I waited till fucking Wednesday, before a Friday recording. Well, first it was the scheduling and the timing.
No, of course. You want to do it in one sitting.
But also, I was not looking forward to this, Ed. Not talking to you, but rewatching this movie. And I got to tell you, it was relatively painless.
I completely agree. I think for all the criticisms that I have heaped and will heap on this, there is something to be said. And again, we're kind of talking about editing a little bit. There is something I use this phrase a lot, where if it's a movie that I don't necessarily like, but it's an easy watch, I'll say, well, it went down smooth. And I think that this went down smooth. Not that it was a pleasant experience, but like there's a lot to be said, because I think if this same movie is made now, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes without even blinking. It's like this movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes and nobody even says.
No, it'd be 10 hours, it'd be 6 parts, it would just be a season 1, like that.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe it'd be a television show, but if it were a theatrical movie, because even something like Honora, which I liked and thought was paced well, was still 2 hours and 15 or 20 minutes. And I'm not saying I would know, well, we're not going to litigate Honora now.
There's very few reasons why a movie needs to enter a third hour.
I completely agree. And you've said that before, and thank you for saying it on this air. But I think the Tony Danza scene, I wrote this down in my notes, like, I think that more of the movie needs to be in this register, because the Tony Danza character opens by saying, I know it's strange for a white guy to say this, but, like, so at least he's like what he's doing is a microaggression, but it isn't like what we've seen in other scenes. And I'm going to get to the other scene that I'm talking about. So
when you have a scene where, with Terrence Howard and his wife getting sexually assaulted by a police officer during a bogus traffic stop, no less, like, the fact that now you need to see that to set up this other thing, but this scene is like arguably no less intense. Like the subtlety
100%
is so clever.
And that's what the movie's, again, I think that We're
You're
still
saying
talking.
this movie's missing subtlety, Ed? Is that what you're saying?
I think he's missing subtlety, but I think again, I wrote down the Tony Danza scene may be the more effective register for this whole movie. Not every scene, because you have the Matt Dillon character is physically volatile. The Tandaway Newton character is emotionally volatile. The Terrence Howard character builds to a point, and this Tony Danza scene is like the middle piece of this, builds to a point where it's volatile. The problem is that we're cutting to stories where I'll give you the example that I want to get to. So the Sandra Bullock character, who I wrote this sidebar, is Sandra Bullock in this movie the proto Karen? Is she like
Yeah,
the first?
and also way underwritten. It's really
Well, we're
it's
getting
really
full props for her for taking on this role, playing against type. I think that she's probably the biggest name in this movie. So nothing I'm going to say is necessarily critical of her performance. But
no.
what's
I think she's very good in the movie. I think the script does her a bit of a disservice.
I completely agree. So to that end, so Sandra Bullock and Brendan Fraser are carjacked by Lorenz Tate and Ludacris, and the next time we see them, they're in the house, and Michael Pena is changing the locks, and Sandra Bullock is saying, I don't want this gangbanger in the house. She's saying all this stuff that I believe her character would say. What I don't believe, and this is why I go back to the thing about register, is that she'd be saying it as loudly as she does. I think she'd be
Mhm.
whispering it too loud, or because it's like she's saying it loudly, and then they have Michael Pena like looking over and hearing it, and I'm like, yes, this woman would say that stuff, but she would at least have the micro she would micromanage her own image enough to be to like do it quietly and say like, well, I'm not racist, but and that's
Yeah,
what this
no,
is
no,
missing.
absolutely. Maybe more like hushed,
Yeah.
like whispered yelling or hushed yelling. And I get that as a politician's wife, and
She'd be way
you
too
know,
image conscious.
that said, I kind of bought the trauma, because remember this movie takes place in like a day or two.
It's one
Also,
day. No, it's
like
literally
yeah,
24
like
hours,
yeah, it's like
which I didn't
so.
remember.
Yeah, so I didn't remember that either. So like that being said, you really feel her trauma, and you really feel like her weird like reverse guilt, I guess you'd call it, about her like seeing these two young black guys, her responding, like her feeling fear just seeing them in that neighborhood, and then being right about it because they carjack her, and then her not trusting her. So I think that line, by the way, from her is probably what made me buy more, that she doesn't give. Like, the whole problem is I didn't say anything, I didn't
Ah.
react, I didn't respond, and so now I don't give a fuck, and I know I'm being
Oh, that's
insensitive
interesting.
to this guy. So I kind of bought it, that she was like, you're right, she's Karen, and she was like she says, I had a gun in my face,
Right.
and I knew I was gonna have a gun in my face because I'm a fucking racist. And like, I don't know, like, I kind of I see what you're saying. And by the way, it wouldn't surprise me if they shot takes of it the way you're
Right.
suggesting, which also wouldn't preclude Pena from overhearing it and reacting in the same way
Yeah.
either. But I think that's an interesting, yeah. I mean, I can see, maybe what, look in the editing room, looking at these kind of two versions or performances and saying, okay, we're in act one. This is not a subtle film. Let's forge ahead with the full throttle version of this.
I think your counter is actually very compelling, that because she's traumatized, which she says, she wouldn't give a shit and would be loud about it. So I think that's an effective counter. But sticking with Sandra Bullock for a second, I completely agree. I think all the performances in this movie are really good. My problem is
Agreed.
not with the acting. Everything I'm attacking is in the writing and sometimes directing sphere of this. But I think that just sticking with her storyline for a second, I don't have too much more to say because her character is so underserved, because she has this revelation and she has it on the fucking phone with a character that we don't ever see. She says, I'm scared. That's why I'm reacting this way. There's like a little bit, they like flirt with like her relationship with her cleaning woman. We see her kind of mistreating her and snapping at her. She should have had that revelation. I hate to rewrite someone else's movie, but like this movie is kind of fucking asking for it, at least in this storyline. And I'm already I'm already giving Tandwe Newton and Matt Dillon bigger parts, but and Terrence Howard too. But it seemed like there were pieces on the board that are just not put together in the right way, because you had this cleaning woman character who's from another country, and I feel like she could have had that reconciliation with that woman. She's talking to someone on the phone because she falls down the stairs and then says to the cleaning woman, "Unless I had this wrong, you're my only friend." And it's just like, aren't all her scenes with this? She's also a nanny too. She's not just a cleaning woman. She's like a nanny. Like, that was an opportunity in keeping with the sort of theme of this movie that would serve that character better. And she's the biggest fucking star in this movie.
I know the director's cut is like 2.5 minutes longer or something like that. I don't know if there's any more scenes with her.
I think I watched it. I don't know the difference.
I know nothing of the behind the scenes or financing or production of this. It wouldn't surprise me if in this era Sandra Bullock's presence and attachment got this movie made, or helped
it totally did.
Get this movie made with the number of logos, studio and production company logos there are at the front of it.
Yeah.
But so maybe it was just like again, it was like she's just there. Like I don't want to say shoehorned in. It certainly felt that way though. And
right.
By the way, not a bad character. Like the concept of the character, the DA's wife and the carjacking and her hostility towards minorities. I like, and very realistic.
Yeah.
Like very, especially now.
Well, also the Brendan Fraser character, and that's another guy who back then he's had a resurgence, but back then was in the Mummy movies, was probably another. I mean, Sandra Bullock was probably the biggest piece of star wattage that you could build the movie around, and because it was an ensemble, she probably worked on it maybe a couple days or a week or something. So like that, you can see how this movie was pieced together, and it's a very smart way to do it. Brendan Fraser, you know, at least at this time, was in a pretty popular franchise, was a familiar face. That's another character that's really underserved, because it seems like, you know, in one scene, it's like he seems like, oh, he's totally like cool with race, but he's also image conscious. But then like you see him and he's like, I need a black cop to decorate. So like, okay, maybe he's not so squeaky clean, but like they just kind of like forget about him.
What I thought was interesting about it was, listen, it was a real, I think it was a cynical kind of politician's view of race. I think that he, you know, it reminded, it was a little Bulworth-esque, you know, it was kind of like this idea of like a guy who is probably very liberal and tolerant, but by virtue of his political position has to be more cynical about, you know, casting roles and the perception of the community in terms of his prosecutorial discretion. And I mean, he's railroading, I mean, not railroading, but one of the subplots is like he's practically railroading a police officer for shooting a black police officer and kind of burying exculpatory evidence. I mean, it's a real, because he feels that like, well, you know, I need to feed a white cop to my, you know, to the city for shooting a black officer. I think it's a really, I understand why other people, because I try to be empathetic or sympathetic and I'm watching this through my eyes. I can't help it. You know, you don't get to pick your parents. You are who you are. Yeah. You know, but like I try to sort of see how would other people perceive this. I found the you know, the racist language, and I found like the way people talk to each other, especially like in Act 1, but like I found that regrettably realistic, and even as realistic it is, even toned down, but much more, I thought, much more candid than a lot of movies and TV shows then and now would do. Just the way people are just so hostile and rude to each other based on nothing more than their race or nationality. I just thought that was really interesting. Like, you know, because at least there was an effort to acknowledge these hostilities. And even though the thing is a bit of a fable and a fairy tale, honestly, like, you know, I still like appreciated that the white guys who wrote and made this movie tried to say like, this is real, that, you know, racism is real. People feel this way about each other, think this way about each other, speak this way to and about each other. And I was just like, again, now more than ever, I like it just it felt, and in a lesser version of the Wire way, just the cynicism about, and this is 20 years ago, the rot at the core of our institutions
Mm-hmm.
as a country and as a government, as a people. This, and the rot is people, individual people who make up these institutions, and who can be toxic. And it used to be that these institutions were greater and more powerful than these individual cancers. And it got to the point where it's metastasized to the collapse of these institutions. And but Crash is really in its macro way and about LA, because LA is, a quote unquote melting pot. But like I say about Miami, the common misconception is a melting pot. It's much more akin to a TV dinner where sometimes the peas fall into the mashed potatoes. We self-segregate, which with this movie's a lot about that. Oh,
Sure.
we live in Studio City, we're black, but we live in, but like,
Right.
it's a lot about that. Michael Pena, we moved out of that neighborhood into this safer neighborhood because a gun, a bullet came through the window. There's a lot about that self-segregation and that tribalism that affects big cities like LA and Miami, and now the country at large. And I was very interested. And the Brendan Fraser character is the district attorney, and that cynicism and the personal interest overtaking the greater good,
Mm-hmm.
and the individuals feeling that they are more than the position, that they are simply a temporary steward of, thanks to one election, and not, and that the position and the job and the title and the institution is greater than these flawed people. But it's not anymore.
Mm.
And I thought that this was almost quaint, because because really the message in this movie is that we can overcome, that the people who get into this for the right reasons and the virtuous reasons, like Ryan Philippe's character, can go bad. You don't change the system changes you, which is what Matt Dillon tries to, tell him. And then Matt Dillon, who is an absolute villain, but who also you understand the humanity in him as well, and he has to confront his own villainy. And I don't know. Again, I was surprised at how much I did not like this movie, and the moments that hit. I know you're going to get into the editing, as far as film as manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
film as even when you're not necessarily from scene to scene, as you said in this broad ensemble, like, you're not necessarily on board with all these storylines. You're not necessarily buying all of these characters and all these. But when those moments hit, when the crash, when Matt Dillon, saves Sandy Newton from the car crash, like that music and that, it is an absolutely brilliantly edited sequence, and you feel it. This really contrived sequence at the end with the store owner shooting at Michael Pena and his daughter. Very effective. This is very effective filmmaking.
So, a lot to say there. First of all, you wondered why I picked you for this movie. I thought you'd be very funny, and you have been, and you will be. But I think what you're saying about institutional rot and all that other stuff is very interesting. And this is obviously something that you do in your work every day. The whole plot about the cop shooting is also really interesting, but also underserved. I think it's the thing I keep coming back to, is that, like, there were just 2 or 3 good movies here, and it isn't. And I don't think this could be fixed with editing, because he didn't shoot enough material to sustain one of these movies. Going back to your point about the Dylan Newton Howard thing, is that, like, even if I cut everything else out, just runtime, there wouldn't be enough movie. I have 2 things I want to 2 things that you brought up editing wise. I strongly agree with one thing that you said, and I strongly disagree with another thing that you said. I'll do the bad news first. So one of the things I did remember from this movie is the scene that you're talking about, where the Persian store owner shoots at Michael Pena and the little girl gets in the way. There's two posters for this movie. One is the Michael Pena character holding his daughter and screaming, and the other one is Matt Dillon hugging Tandaway Newton. So incredibly, the two things that you responded
By the
to.
way, speaking of two white guys talking about is what you could also call this show, two white guys talking. Is it Tandaway? I thought it was.
Yes. Okay. So I'm glad you brought this up. It was Tandy. She changed her name or reverted it back to Tandaway, and I had to look up how to pronounce it. So she made a very good movie called All the Old Knives with Chris Pine. And when I watched that movie, which came out maybe 2 years ago, pretty good movie, really good movie, actually. I noticed that it was Thandiwe.
Right, the W's, right.
Okay. The W is new. My understanding is it was Tandy up until a couple of years ago, and she changed it back to the original, what she had originally, and it is pronounced Tandaway. So that's why
I'll call her whatever she wants to be called.
No, and that's fair.
I just didn't get the memo, Ed.
No. There's no memo. I just wanted to, just like I'm
just saying I wasn't trying to be disrespectful.
Not at all.
Or dead name her or anything.
No, just like if I talk about the movie Inception, I'm going to say Elliot Page, even though he was Ellen Page back then. This is one of those things I will retroactively, I'll say the Wachowskis directed.
I appreciate that. There's also a name in the credits at the top. That's why I mean.
No. No, it's fine. I think it's excusable to call her Tandy Newton because she was Tandy Newton when she did this. It's not the same thing as transitioning to another. But I just and plus I like her, and I've ever listened to.
We digress.
No, but look, that's part of this movie. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about race, whether we should be or not, and we're talking about cultural identity. So it's really interesting that like the two posters, the two moments you just mentioned, which I think are iconic to this movie, because two of the posters they did is one is Michael Pena holding his daughter and screaming, one is Matt Dillon holding Tandaway Newton. And those were the two, at least the two that I remember. There could have been an entire ad campaign where they focused on different characters. That would certainly make sense. But the scene with Michael Pena, where that scene to me was fucking ludicrous, and it got a bad laugh, including the way it was edited. I think it was set up in that because I like the scene with his daughter where she's hiding under the bed and he talks about invisibility. I thought that was a scene that was really well played. I thought that was another scene, kind of like the Tony Danza scene, that was like done in kind of this subtle register. Maybe some of it was improvised because they were dealing with a little girl. And in my opinion, if you're dealing with a really young actor, you get the spirit of the lines instead of the actual lines. I can't speak to that, but it felt natural, that scene that was setting it up. So I just felt that scene editorially was just ridiculous, but it was also the way it was staged. It was ridiculous. And the music was ridiculous. The way the camera's zooming in on him and he's screaming and the mother's screaming. And then the aftermath of it. I mean, I feel like that's what a lot of people hang their hat on when they make comments like the ones I read from Letterboxd. I think that scene is absurd in all the wrong ways. However, the scene that you also mentioned where Matt Dillon pulls Tandaway Newton out of the car that's turned upside down, putting aside that, and this movie's filled with this, but I wrote down on my notes 1,000 times, I wrote, GLA is a really small town because the way these characters all intersect, and this has nothing to do with race or white guys doing it, the connections in this movie, I find most of them to be forced. But if there was the movie that I guess I want that was just about Dillon, Newton, and Howard, if somehow you could countenance the coincidence that he'd be on scene when this happened, which is one coincidence instead of the 50 that are in this movie, putting that aside, which I was able to, I thought that's the best scene in the movie because I thought that it did everything that what they were trying to do, is showing that, like, okay, nobody is one thing. The thing I say in my life all the time is nobody or very few people are one thing. There are very few people who are all good or all bad. And I think that the Matt Dillon character, you see that he cares for his father, and I have some empathy for that as somebody who had a sick father. So you see that like he's not just cartoonishly racist, even though I think that might be how he's written. And I think he made an also great point when he says to Ryan Phillippe about like, wait till you've been on the job a few more years. Like I don't know his intention behind that line is pure, but I think
Right. You think you know who you are.
exactly. And I think he's dead on
And
there.
yeah,
Yeah. And so
I think it's fascinating.
fascinating. And again, this is why I think he's my favorite performance in this movie. And I don't think it's an accident that he's the one that's nominated when no one else is. Putting aside the other actors who were nominated in other movies. But I think the scene where he, you 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 see his function, it's like, okay, well, policemen, you know, this is their job too. It's their job to protect us and to save us. And the fact that she is like, no, not you, which you completely buy, and how he has to, and you see on his face, like, yeah, I understand why she doesn't want to get out of this car. I did this. I'm not saying he's repentant in that scene. In fact, I would love, even in this configuration of this movie, they still needed a scene after Dylan. I still would like one more scene with the two of them, or that scene to be longer. It's like you're saying, maybe this movie is a little too short for all we're
No,
praising it.
I think that would ruin it. Honestly,
You
this is
think?
what I'm saying about that. I really do. I think, and of course, as you talked about the various coincidences here of like why would they intersect again? That's the whole point. Is that they're pulled apart in that moment, and that is the end of that relationship, if you will. I mean, I was a little more confused about how Terrence Howard was unaware that his wife was in this horrific near-death accident
Right.
at the hospital, presumably, and then they just kind of chat later when she's at home. I mean, that was a little more
Very good point.
confounding
Yeah,
to me.
she's going to the hospital for observation. She rolled a car. She's going to the hospital whether
But
she likes it or
again,
not.
I think the editing Oscar was for that scene. Yes, I think it was for the whole
Mm,
movie, and I think again, the efficiency of the film and the tightness of the
right.
editing of the scene. But like it would that scene is just it's an editing class, it's a scoring class,
Yeah.
it's an act class, it's a directing class. I mean, it's just a
Yeah.
it's a really, and it's a centerpiece because it's like kind of 45-ish minutes in. It's not
Yeah.
quite the middle of the movie, but it's kind of the middle of the movie.
Second
and
act for
and
sure. Yeah.
they've already earned an emotional peak like that, which is and it speaks to, of course, as you said, the strength of that storyline. And I mean, and it's fast, it's slow, it's intense.
Yeah.
I think you feel the threat of the gasoline.
Yeah.
And the nearby fire. I mean, it's really just something. Listen, when I said earlier that the movie is a bit of a fable or a fairy tale as well, um, like I meant like certainly the Michael Pena arc and that last scene. It is ridiculous, but like again, in a way by design for a movie that really tries to, with varying degrees of success and failure, balance a reality with a fantasy, like I said, with a fable, with a fairy tale. Like I, I think that I mean, what doesn't work for me is a guy just kind of like walks away with the gun. He'd be like, they're
Oh, the
like
store
bye.
owner. Yeah.
Like yeah, it's yeah. Like, by the way, I thought the aftermath of the scene was sillier than the moment of the gunshot itself.
Okay.
Like what happens to me? They just kind of go inside, close the door, and they're just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, nice to see. Thanks for
No one
stopping
calls
by."
the police, and they established they're in a
No.
better neighborhood. Nobody calls the police.
Right, a gunshot goes off in the broad daylight. Kids coming home from school,
Yeah.
middle of the damn day, and then he just kind of goes back. Like
Yeah.
that was a little more. Listen, you're not going to stick the landing on all of these balls that you're juggling.
No.
In the air at the same time. But like this is a fundamentally flawed movie, as most movies and most people are. But yeah, but I thought in that moment, it like the intensity of the scene and her right, he doesn't have the cloak and her running out and
Sure.
the mother screaming and again, this is just like the editor really earned his paycheck and his Oscar in moments like that. Again, the the fault of the rest of it is on the writer.
No, I think it's also the way it's shot, the zooms and things. I'm not laying it all on the editor's shoulders. I think that I mean, the coincidences again is the thing. I think a better example for that. I mean, you've got two movies. You got Shortcuts and Magnolia that are in LA that have these sprawling casts. I think Magnolia, just going with a more recent example, I think Magnolia, not all the characters intersect, but the ones that do, like Jason Robards' wife is Julianne Moore. His nurse is Philip Seymour Hoffman. Jason Robards' son is Tom Cruise. Jason Robards' second in command is Philip Baker Hall. So like they're already have these relationships where there's already like these tendrils where they be connected. That's not what Crash is interested in, and that's fine. As far as the fable aspect, I think that's fair. But do you know the Mammoth movie Things Change? Remember that movie?
No.
Okay, so it's a movie he made in between House of Games and Homicide. It's Joe Mantegna and Don Amici. And that's a movie, it's a really good movie. It was co-written by Shel Silverstein, if you can believe it. It's PG, and that's a movie that sets up, which Magnolia does too, by the way, that we're in a world that's those like Things Change, sticking with that for a second, it's like a fairy tale. And they set up that it's sort of a fairy tale. And it has a bunch of like Deus Ex Machinas that don't feel that way because Mamet and Shel Silverstein have set the table of like, okay, this is not realistic. This is like a fairy tale where things are gonna fall a certain way. And Magnolia, again, because the characters that PTA are creating have relationships. Again, Melora Walters is the daughter of Philip Baker Hall. So like it's conceivable that these people would know each other and intersect. In Crash, which again, I guess it's its ambition, is that these characters are so disparate, which LA is disparate, but I just feel like they all intersect in a way that strains credibility. I'm okay with some of it happening. I'm okay with Ludacris and Lorenz Tate intersecting with Terrence Howard because that goes somewhere. So some of it works, some of it doesn't, but I don't, I think we're really talking about editing a lot, and you're an editor, and I think that it's interesting how much this is coming up, but I think it's instructive. The scene where, Terrence Howard is at his breaking point and he gets carjacked and he drives away and the cops are surrounding him and he's got a gun and he doesn't want to back down. And we know why he doesn't want to back down. He's been humiliated and aggressed against enough. And Ryan Phillippe, who stood quiet while Matt Dillon assaulted a woman, steps up and intervenes.
So let me say this. A lot of this movie plays like, because of its sort of sceney nature, right? Like with these one-off scenes that, the mosaic kind of feel, it feels like a bit of a screenwriter exercise. Yeah. Where and I think the Terrence Howard and Tondeway Newton scenes are uniquely well written, maximizing conflict, a real clear, but without the repetition. Still a really vivid arc. Whereas, so in this idea of this, Crash as a screenwriter's exercise, he's also trying to misdirect the audience and not have the most obvious and tragic outcomes that you would expect to happen. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you expect Terrence Howard to get shot and killed. You expect Michael Pena's daughter to get shot, or at least him to get shot and get like and not necessarily Ryan Phillippe to like he's trying to, he again, some of it is a bit cynical in that as writers, they're deliberately trying to not create the outcome that you most expect, and so as to leave you surprised. Like they're like, that's exactly what they would expect to happen, so we're gonna have a more fantastic. I mean, the idea that Ryan Phillippe runs up there and basically wraps his arms around Terrence Howard to prevent these other two LAPD officers from murdering him, and we see him tuck the gun into his right. It's all set up to have this very inevitable kind of the ending that Lawrence Tate actually has. So he doesn't have a gun. He has the little, the little what do you call it? The little sort of a model, the little figurine,
Right.
not like, again, lots of spoilers here, but like, but
Spoil
I
away.
guess like, you also, we are watching a movie that
Yes.
it's not a documentary. We are watching a movie, and we are watching this creative interpretation of this world of characters that these guys created. And to that end, I appreciated that the scene with Terrence Howard's, one his penultimate scene is as intense as it is. And me vaguely recalling that it doesn't end the way that it perhaps inevitably would in real life, because it's still a movie. And I don't know. Um I appreciated that. I think about it in that it wanted to. Again, it was cynical in that they were deliberately trying to surprise us, but that's what a movie hopefully is supposed to do: is subvert expectations and not allow you to predict every outcome.
Well, sticking with that, there's two things about that that I wanted to unpack. One, you know, is this is something that I don't think. I mean, a lot of things in this movie maybe haven't aged well, but a term that we weren't using 20 years ago that I'm hearing a lot, and it's something that just popped in my head, maybe to my detriment, or maybe it shouldn't have, is with the Ryan Phillippe scene. I just wrote down white savior. Is this is Ryan Phillippe a white savior? Now, to be fair, what's coming ahead, which I also want to get to, the Ryan Phillippe character might undercut that, but is that something that we, that we would have not bumped on 20 years ago? Am I being too sensitive? I'm not dinging it for it, but it is something just popped in my head and I wanted to talk about it since we're obviously talking about it. Like, could the Ryan Phillippe character have been any other race? And does that add to the multiculturalism of this movie? And does that maybe, or do you think that Haggis's point, given the misdeed that Ryan Phillippe is about to commit a couple scenes later, does that undercut it?
That whole character, I mean, that's a 2 scene arc. I'm sorry, it's a 3 scene arc. It
Right.
is Matt Dillon telling him, "You think you know who you are." There is the scene of him saving Terrence Howard, and there is the scene of him committing this murder, based entirely on his, uh, 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 I guess, innate racism or bias or racial bias, and finding out who he is,
Mm.
who he really is. Now, I don't think that when Matt Dillon said that, he meant like in a few hours or tomorrow, or your
No.
next shift or whatever. But like, that is the arc of that character.
Right.
So I think that, could it have worked if I think, by the way, if he was Hispanic, I think that arc would have worked just the same.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I don't think it would have worked. Actually, it might have even worked if he were black, to tell
Yeah.
you the truth.
That's what I was wondering. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not Ryan Phillippe's another
It might arguably be more intriguing.
right.
Because you always hear in these situations, it's not about black and white, it's blue.
Sure.
It's and so that would be intriguing as well. But I think, just like, as the character, as that sort of arc is written and plays out, I think it works.
I want to jump to something that happens right after that. So Terrence Howard drives away, having been saved by Ryan Phillippe, and Ludacris is in the car. And he says something I really want to unpack. He says, "You embarrass me. You embarrass yourself." So I'm not going to sit here and I just want to unpack that. I don't know. I just wrote that down. I'm like, I got to talk about that. I'm not even saying I'm coming into this conversation knowing how I feel. But my question to you, I guess, is what did you make of that? What did you make of that exchange? I don't know if it's supposed to be ambiguous. I don't know if I don't know. What did you make of
I
that?
didn't I didn't think much of it. I
Okay.
mean, and,
Okay.
and nor do I know that I bought. But the whole thing's ridiculous. He's in the car. He's caught. He carjacks him. He carjacks him back in his own car back, and they get into this
The cops don't see
ridiculous
Ludacris ever, which is ridiculous. They would have come to the front of the car to
this
cover the.
police chase.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that, like, Terrence Howard gets out, Ludacris does it. Like,
Yeah.
it's an intense scene, but it also has this very. Now, I guess I bought it for a while because Terrence Howard's clearly, like, it's his arc in this movie, to snap.
Sure. And
And
he's really good in that scene too. He's really terrific in that scene.
really, really good in
Yeah.
that scene. I mean, he's really good in the whole movie, but he is, yes, he is.
Yes, agreed.
He sells it. There, the best that he can.
Yes.
And then I mean, he hands him the gun back and then insults it. Like it's a little,
Yeah.
it's a little silly in the way that, like, in the fable way of the movie, of that element of this movie. And I just honestly, I didn't, like I said, the most of these storylines, the ending, they don't stick to the ending,
Well,
in the script, and I did not buy that moment. I mean, even more ludicrous is how Ludacris's whole storyline ends. I mean, it's absolutely absurd,
well, let's go into it. We're there. Let's go there. So
oh
so
God, do we
Ludacris.
have to?
Well, let's do it quickly. So the Ludacris character.
First of all, how did he not know they were in the back of that truck when he stole it? For fuck's sake,
Yeah.
so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not like they would be making noise. There was like 15 people in there easy. Yeah, so
Edward, you could smell them. Okay, like there were human trafficking people who clearly were dirty. Now they did establish that it was cold out in LA, obviously,
Yeah,
at
it
that
snows at
time.
the
So
end.
fortunately they survived, but they were deliberately so dirty. You realize that they
Yeah.
were smuggled in these, again, like there, you could not know that there was that quantity of humanity alive in the back. And you also saw there was like nothing but a little schmata, like kind of separating, the cage in the back of this van. Or it was, please, dude.
Yeah, I mean, if he was like in an 18-wheeler, like a cargo truck
Sure.
that had a cab, then
It's a van. It's a
yeah,
fucking van,
yeah,
dude.
yeah.
And now, by the way, I understand this was a circle of life kind of a thing, and
Right.
and of course, it was about immigrants in that
Sure.
but again, that whole moment, screenwriting exercise.
Right.
Like this is the kind of shit you write in a class, and you'd get an A, and maybe your script winds up on the blacklist, but it should probably not be made.
Well, that's fair. So going to the end of the Philippi sort of arc of this, so what I didn't understand about that scene, I understood its intention. I don't understand why Ryan Phillippe is so amped up, why he's so angry at Lorenz Tate. The shooting part of it, that's just sort of the obviously the climax of this scene. I just, like, when I'm watching this, I'm like, what is his fucking problem? Like, why is he so upset about this, which doesn't track with the character? I mean, he should be
No,
feeling.
not again. I get the writer. I think the writers let them down there. I was
Yeah.
like, I think I literally said aloud, why did he pick him up in the first place? Like, why you're picking up a hitchhiker in the middle? Like, if
Well, yeah, you're a
gonna be-
police officer. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, none of my problems at all are with the acting, but like, it just didn't make sense for the character. It made sense that, like, oh, this guy's gonna make a mistake. He's gonna kill an innocent person, and that's what Matt Dillon warned him about. Like, and then we're gonna see him cover it up. And like, if Ryan Phillippe had walked into the police station and said, "Hey, I shot this kid." Again, another movie that you could have seen, and then Keith David, who plays his boss, might have said, like, "Okay, well, you're going to jail, or we're gonna cover this up because blue is thicker than black and white," like you alluded to a few minutes ago. They do none of that. He covers it up.
I would have loved for that Keith Howard thing to pay off too, because I didn't love that scene either.
His boss.
Yeah, I mean, a really well acted scene, and
Yeah.
and I think the logic of it was sound,
Right.
but I didn't love the dialogue and the way that it played out. I thought they both acted the hell out of it.
This is my take on this movie, and I guess I already know that you disagree. Do you remember when lockdown started? Very early in lockdown, a bunch of celebrities recorded themselves singing Imagine by John Lennon. And it was like one of them singing one part. And remember this video? It was like Schwarzenegger and Gal Gadot and like all these people. And the reason I bring this video up is I thought it was extremely well intentioned, but a lot of people very rightly said, "You guys are in fucking mansions." Like, Schwarzenegger's literally in a jacuzzi as he's singing his part.
It's what the kids call cringe.
Exactly. My question is this the movie version of something that is incredibly that may be well intentioned? Maybe is this the movie version of that? And I guess that's my question. Like, is this well-intentioned?
Going in, this is surprise is the theme of this episode. Like
Yeah,
going in, I thought that's what, and maybe because my expectations were there, like I was already cringing before the movie started.
I was too.
I actually kind of eased up over it very quickly too. I was like, okay, this is not nearly as bad as I fear, and I didn't remember it being bad either. To be fair, I just thought it wasn't going to age well, and I
Right.
was actually surprised. By the way, when I say at how well it aged, I don't mean like a fine wine. Don't get me wrong. I
Right.
just meant how not cringe it turned out to be.
Right.
Not saying it wasn't cringe at all, but it was much less cringe than I would have expected 20 years later.
Yeah.
And how true to the voice of our country today, a lot of it is disappointingly.
Yeah.
Um like some of those letterbox quotes cited. So like I mean, I don't. Again, I think that different people, other than you and I, 47-year-old white men in America who don't know a lot about struggle, I think because of the way the world treats us innately, and this country treats us innately as white men, I could imagine other people having a different perspective on that. Again, as evidenced by some of the letterbox
Yeah.
reviews. But I'm sensitive to that. And I watched it with a hyper awareness of how others might view it. And again, like the word problematic could certainly reasonably come up in various scenes and lines and characters. But overall, I didn't. I can't, I wouldn't. I would rate it much lower on the cringe meter than I would have expected to.
Okay. Why do you think that this movie won? We're going to get into what it was up against in a minute, but just unto itself, putting aside what it's nominated against, why do you think that this movie won? It's been sort of cynically looked at, and maybe not even cynical, maybe cynical doesn't mean wrong, that this was, maybe Hollywood congratulating itself for solving racism or something. Like that's something that
Ah,
somebody said in the letterbox comments. But what's worth noting here is that we do not yet have the preferential ballot. So we're still down to 5 nominees. So this is still the movie that has the most votes win, as opposed to more people ranking this 2 or 3 and number 1s and 2s getting knocked out. So like a preferential ballot explains, at least to me, why certain things win that aren't as maybe as good as others if they're safer. But unto itself, why do you think Crash wins the Academy Award for Best Picture?
I think a lot of it has to do with, I don't want to call it white guilt, but
Call it that. I think
but
it's
maybe white guilt. And what else am I going to call it? I
call
did.
it white guilt. I
I
mean,
called it that. So,
we can say
um,
it.
you know, it's like I mean, just before you mention something, it's prefaced by not to mention, but like but I'm going to anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like also a little bit of like they like to feel like, oh, we turn the mirror on ourselves. It's an LA story.
Yeah.
So I think there's a certain bias. Obviously, I don't know the exact geographic makeup of the voting base of the Academy, but I can venture a guess it's Southern California, made up a great deal of Southern California. So like, so
Undeniably.
I think there's that there's we held a mirror up to ourselves. We're being self-critical and analytical. I don't know so much as I don't remember the sentiment at the moment of patting themselves on the back for quote unquote solving racism. But there is, like I said, there is that sort of white guilt
Mhm.
element of that as well. There is that sort of like self-congratulatory idea of like, I'm a liberal, I'm anti-racist, I'm
Right.
open-minded. But then there is, I mean, we are born with certain biases. What's the Avenue Q song? Everyone's a little bit racist sometimes. We
Yeah.
we have certain I know people, again, things were not like implicit bias and conclusions that we jump to based on other people's appearance, race, religion, nation of origin. It's just it's the tribalism, and so I think that the idea that Hollywood took it on, Paul Haggis took it on head on,
Right.
I think, yeah, there so self-congratulatory perhaps is, is a good way of putting that. Not to mention how many people's friends are in the movie, involved in the movie,
Sure.
finance the movie, produce the movie. Like, it's such a big cast,
Yeah.
a crew of Hollywood people. So like, just, I mean, the 0 degrees of separation between that entire cast and crew and a lot of the voters in the Academy, like just the politics of it alone within the Academy it makes it kind of unbeatable, I would think.
The biggest, I think I agree with everything you just said. Crucially, the biggest voting block are actors. Let's move on to categorically denied. Before we get to Best Picture, let's see if Crash was worthy of the other 2 Oscars it won. So, it wins original screenplay. It's against Good Night and Good Luck, Match Point, The Squid and the Whale, and Syriana. So, of the movies that you've seen that you remember, comparing it to those other movies, again, that you know, remember, would you give the Best Original Screenplay to Crash?
I honestly, in my opinion, looking back, it strikes me as a weak category,
Okay.
which is surprising, I think, for that category. And so my short answer is no. I like, but when you look at
We're only talking about what it's against. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Good Night and Good Luck.
Mhm.
I would, meaning I wouldn't complain if you said Good Night and it lost to Good Night and Good Luck. I would be like, okay,
That's
like
fine.
that tracks.
That's a very fair answer, and I appreciate that. So, the one we've talked about, this is kind of a first for this show. We've actually talked about this category all through it. So it wins Best Editing. It is against Cinderella Man, The Constant Gardener, Munich, and Walk the Line. So against, same question, against those 4 that you've seen that you remember, would you give Crash the editing Oscar? We've talked a lot about this, so we should come down on a verdict.
I mean, again, a continuing theme here is it doesn't entirely aggravate me, but Munich, man. I mean, Munich and arguably Walk the Line. You know, musicals are tough. You know, like are tough, and it was a well edited movie. But like, dude, Munich is just. I mean, again, it's almost cheating because when Spielberg's in the mix,
Right.
you're getting, you're getting a uniquely superbly made, crafted film with the greatest artisans ever assembled to create motion pictures are on a Spielberg movie. Munich just fucking, it's a banger, man.
Yeah, I would say I'll answer editing, and I forgot to answer screenplay, but I'll go in reverse. So I'd say for editing, I would say Munich. I'd put above Crash. I think it's a terrific movie. I'd say The Constant Gardener, which is another great movie that is.
I don't remember it. Yeah,
Constant Gardener was Fernando Meirelles' movie with Ray Fiennes and Rachel Weisz, who wins the Oscar. It's a really, really good movie. I think it's a Le Carre novel.
I know it doesn't work this way because people don't. Oscar winners aren't picked this way, but perhaps people vote this way in their minds. I'd be much. It would annoy me less the editing Oscar and the screenplay Oscar if those were sort of like consolation Oscar, meaning if it didn't win Best Picture but it won screenplay and or edit, like I'd be like, okay, like I because the editing was one of the highlights of the movie. So that would make sense. I don't necessarily think the screenplay in and of itself was one of the highlights of the movie. However, without that original screenplay, the movie wouldn't exist at all. So you could make the argument for that being a consolation prize for losing Best Picture, but it didn't lose Best Picture.
Yeah.
And I would argue, by the way, that the movie might have been better directed than it was written, but so be it.
Yeah, and for original screenplay, I would pick Match Point from this group. So, Billy, let's see if we crash into each other just so we can feel something. Now it's time to test our hindsight with the verdict. Against Brokeback Mountain, Capote, Good Night and Good Luck, and Munich, was Crash the best movie nominated this year?
No.
Okay.
Again, I am not as offended as I thought I would be that it won.
Right.
Like I could totally live with it.
Sure.
You know, there's certainly some years I'm sure where I couldn't. You happen to pick a year, surprisingly. Again, that's the theme here, right? Is the surprise that this is a year could have gone any number of ways, and I would have been okay with it. Brokeback Mountain is superb. Obviously, it's split with the directing award.
Yeah,
For the um, you know, Brokeback Mountain would have won this year or in recent year. Like that movie,
hard agreed.
transported
Yeah.
20 years later, wins. Capote's a great movie.
Mhm.
Not that it was the best picture of the year, but again, like I don't know that Good Night and Good Luck is a great movie. There's no movie I think in that category that would upset me now 20 years on. I'd be like, not worthy, not worthy. I
Right.
mean, one could easily argue Crash is the least of them
Mhm.
if you were to rank them. But there's just no doubt that in terms of a movie that endures and a movie that is so almost comically well made and that really stands up, that Munich is just, to me, is just an extraordinary achievement. What it means and what it says, and with that story, and again, the greatest, craftsmen and women coming together to just make this brilliant and also wildly entertaining and rewatchable and revisitable movie. I mean, I don't want to necessarily declare it a remote dropper, but it's pretty. I mean,
Yeah.
Crash is not.
Yeah.
You see Crash on, you don't stop
Yeah.
change the channel necessarily.
Right.
Munich, depending on what's seen it, you might just you might chill for a bit and then find yourself all wrapped up in it all over again 20 years later.
Brokeback Mountain, I agree, would win today. Brokeback Mountain wins director, it wins adapted screenplay, and it wins score. So they each win 3. We move away for a long time. This idea of the best picture winner winning like 7, 8 Oscars, we're kind of gotten back to that, but with the preferential ballot and stuff, like sometimes like Spotlight wins with 2 Oscars, which is like almost unheard of. It wins picture and screenplay, and that's it. I do agree with you wholeheartedly that of these nominees, Munich is the movie that I would pick. I think that it's it's either underrated or kind of forgotten, you know, when comparing it to Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan, the only of the 2 R-rated movies that Spielberg did. I kind of prefer Munich to Private Ryan. It may seem like a strange comparison. I just think it's
I 100% agree.
yeah, I think that Munich is one of those things that when it came out, I liked it. I think you talked about how Crash is sadly as relevant as today as it was 20 years ago. That's true of Munich. I don't want to get into
100
politics, but
absolutely.
I think that Munich just shows that, you know, when you're
But by the
dealing.
way, Saving Private Ryan is also a tougher watch, just emotionally and
Sure.
violent. Like
No.
it's just a tougher watch. Munich it's a thriller. It's much more entertaining innately.
Yeah, it's spycraft. It's guys running around the world
Oh,
killing people. It's much more like a 70s John Frankenheimer movie, like Black Sunday or like a Friedkin
that
movie.
that John Williams score helps too. I
John will,
mean,
yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, the idea that Munich nails so well, which it was criticized for, is this idea that like, okay, well, you can't do nothing about terrorism, but anything you do is not going to end it. There's no winning this. And that's what's so fascinating about this movie. And that's why I think he was criticized. The very last shot of the movie, you see the Twin Towers in the background. And some people felt like, you know, he was saying that, the activity of these guys led to 9/11. And I think all he was saying was just like, look, Israel did what it had to do, but it's not going to solve it. But of course, the solution is not to do nothing. And 9/11 is just it's just showing that like this isn't going to ever end.
the movie's perfect and fuck anyone who has any problem with with the end of that.
Right.
With
I'm
the
just saying when it came out,
Again,
maybe
I'm sorry, all movies are flawed, but when you
right.
say a movie's perfect, it's as close to perfect
Yeah.
as you can get. And I mean, in order to talk about that, you said not to get political, but in order to
Yeah.
talk about that movie, you have to get political.
Of course.
And what it is it's also it is a real indictment on what was the so-called war on terror, which is wars. The term war infers that there is something to be won, which means that there is an end, a foreseeable conclusion.
Mhm.
That is not what a war on crime. A war on terror is much more akin to a war on crime. It is maintenance. It is an ongoing operation and commitment. And the idea that you can somehow solve it or fix it or win it by taking out this group of people or that group or the people who perpetuated this particular act of terror, and you see what it does to those men who are again, this is kind of goes back to the institutional concept of like all these institutions are humans, are men and women with flaws and with problems, and in this case PTSD, and
Sure.
and I mean, we could talk about Munich for the next, again, for another podcast, but like
Yeah.
the movie is just a masterpiece that, as you said, is as relevant, if not more so,
Yeah.
today than it was then.
Yeah, I mean, Crash and Munich are interesting bedfellows in that way because, like, what's going on in the world today, where what's going
It's
on.
it's the necessity and the futility
Yeah,
that is absolutely devastating
yeah,
about Munich.
yes,
That's what it is, and that's life. That dichotomy
yeah,
of I have to do something that will, in the long run, will get us nowhere,
yeah,
but I have no choice
yeah,
because it feels like a matter of survival in the moment. Fucking fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
the cinema, the moral dilemma, I mean, just come on.
And the way
Munich.
as I mentioned, that scene in Knocked Up where they talk about Munich, the Seth Rogen and all his friends. He's like, if any of us get laid tonight, it's because of Eric Bana and Munich. Like Munich is like the first movie where Jews are kicking ass. You should look at that. You remember that scene?
Oh, it's also nothing about Munich. It's not really about Munich.
Well, no, Munich is
either.
the event. Munich,
but that's also the genius
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
It could have been called 9/11. Like, for example, like what's like it's oh god, dude. And you made the point as well. I think I to my recollection, I had seen not before the nominations per se, but I had seen all of those Best Picture nominees from the 78th Annual Academy Awards. Munich is the only one that I have not only revisited voluntarily in the intervening 2 decades, but have multiple times. By the way, both intentionally and unintentionally, and accidentally, So I think that says a lot in and of itself, for particularly in an era, in a decade of movies that we had just said we do not often revisit.
Sure. The thing that's interesting about Munich and how I think it compares favorably to Schindler's List in that he shot it in the same way, in that Munich was shot very quickly. He started shooting it in July and it came out in December, and he was shot it kind of from the hip, and it doesn't look sloppy, but I think he did a similar thing on Schindler's List where he didn't storyboard and he just kind of showed up like Kubrick and said, how am I shooting this today? And I think he didn't overthink it. And I think it's like for someone like Steven Spielberg to kind of not improv in the way that he's not prepared, but just to kind of like shoot a little faster and looser, yet still have the impeccable craft, because he just can't not make things look good. He's too great a filmmaker. So I think that that's also instructive, that the fact that it was shot quickly, and I think there was an urgency that bleeds through.
And also speaks to how brilliant the editing was as well, getting back to the earlier category.
Sure, 110%. Now let's move on to the appeal. So Billy, was there, nominated or not, a movie you liked the best in 2005, whether it was nominated for an Academy Award or not?
No, I think first of all, I think that, as we've already established, I'm pretty comfortable with the Best Picture category. I'm pretty,
Yeah.
Again, if we were in an era of 9 or 10 nominees, maybe you could find, a couple more or whatever. I think there are movies worth mentioning.
Sure, mention them.
Probably would have been very much in 3 in particular, that in this era of more nominees and more commercial nominees as well, even though they don't necessarily win, they're nominated.
Sure.
I think one of them came up, Hustle and Flow.
Okay.
Which did get some nominations and a win.
The song won. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Hustle and Flow I thought was a great movie that year.
Mm-hmm.
I think Batman Begins was again the kind of movie that in the era of more nominees for Best Picture might have been recognized. Would not have won, but would have been,
I think
recognized.
So. I agree.
and one that I think get A History of Violence, Cronenberg. Let's bring Cronenberg back into it.
Mm,
I think it was a great movie,
mm.
an underappreciated film, and one that holds up as a work of cinema.
So my best movie of 2005 is Woody Allen's Match Point. So Woody Allen and Billy and I, you've talked about this when it was happening. From 1992 to 1997, Woody Allen went on a 6-film fucking heater. I don't know that any other filmmaker, Hitchcock probably is the only other one I could think of who made this many great movies in a row. He made Husbands and Wives, Manhattan Murder Mystery, Bullets Over Broadway, Mighty Aphrodite, Everyone Says I Love You, and Deconstructing Harry in a row.
It was all. It was the, as I recall, it was the ones between the black and white ones. Am I remembering that?
Very good point. You took me right to my point. So his next movie is Celebrity, which is not good. The next movie he makes is Sweet and Lowdown, which is terrific. But following Sweet
And before that was Shadows and Fog.
Shadows and Fog precedes. Yes, so his two movies that precede this 6-heater run are Shadows and Fog, which I believe is I think I have ranked second or third of my lowest ranked Woody Allen movies. I think I have it just above. I think I have it above Rifkin's Festival and The Curse of the Jade Scorpion. Those are the bottom 3 of 50. That's a lot of movies. And Celebrity just does not work. There are a couple moments in it that do work, but it's
Absolutely.
just but it's
there's one uniquely like brilliant scene. Like that's all I can remember. Like one great scene.
Yeah, I think Woody Allen's one of those filmmakers that even with one or two exceptions in his movies that don't work, he can't walk from A to Z and not give you a line, a scene, a moment that's great, even if the movie around it is not good. But from 2000 to 2005, I won't go through all the movies. The movies range from noble misfires to mediocre to the very worst movie he ever made, which I just mentioned was The Curse of the Jade Scorpion. It was a fallow period. But basically, when Match Point comes out, it's a real zag because he's in a new city. He's got a young cast. There's no one in the movie that's an avatar for Woody, like John Cusack in Bullets Over Broadway, which is a successful version of that. There's no role that he would have ever played.
One of the few successful versions.
He's the most successful of that, I would think. He and Jesse Eisenberg in Cafe Society are the guys who can play Woody and make it their own and still play Woody, which is a very small bullseye. Those are the top 2. Those are the greats at that. But it wasn't like a return. Again, Match Point's not a return to form as much as it is like this total like reformation. Brian De Palma said this great thing about how directors have to get away from themselves, and that's why he did Scarface, because what did I know about Cuban gangsters in Miami? And Woody Allen tackled a lot of the themes in Match Point in Crimes and Misdemeanors, and he would do it again in a really good movie called Coup de Chance, which might be the last movie he ever makes. But I think this take on it is like more Hitchcockian, it's sexier, it's even more morally ambiguous in Crimes and Misdemeanors. Crimes and Misdemeanors is a much better movie. I'd rank that third on my list, but I think this is like a worthy double feature. I recently saw Interiors, which I thought I enjoyed more than I thought I would. I thought that was a very noble reach, but I thought he did that movie better down the line. Like it was kind of a warm-up. So for me, Match Point is a master filmmaker's final masterpiece, if he is indeed done. There are a few great movies that follow, but for me, this is the last 5-star Woody Allen movie.
Jesus, now I might have to revisit it.
I think you should. I think it's really, you know what's crazy is that Match Point is his longest movie, and it's 2 hours and 5 minutes. Like
that's a long Woody Allen movie.
It's a long Woody Allen movie, but all his movies typically go between 85 and 100 minutes. And he has said, all my movies would be better if they were shorter, even at that length. So he is never a guy who cracks 2 hours. I'm not saying Match Point feels long, but like I was stunned when I learned this. His longest movie is 2 hours and 5 minutes. And we've talked a lot about length, not even so much in relation. Well, we talked about it in Crash, given the brevity of it. Billy, our next category is Spotlight. This is where we spotlight something from any movie we liked, whether it's a performance, cinematography, score, a stunt sequence. So, Billy, what thing or things do you want to spotlight from 2005?
It's one thing, and it's not because I think it should, or this actor should have won an Academy Award or even been nominated for it. Mm-hmm. But I think it's impossible, since we're looking back 20 years, 20 years ago and 20 years of subsequent film history cannot discount how important this is to film history in the subsequent decades, and that is Robert Downey Jr. and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Oh wow.
And
wow. Okay.
Not just because I enjoyed the movie, Shane Black's movie, but because that is arguably his, for lack of a better term, comeback. His, he did the Singing Detective, whatever, in 03, which was an opportunity for him to, to headline a movie again. But like this, also the character, his personality really precedes the Tony Stark persona in many ways, which obviously you cannot, for whatever you think of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it is a historic achievement in cinema, for better or worse. And Robert Downey Jr. is a linchpin to that and its success. And without Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, without Shane Black, which is how, and then Robert Downey Jr. returns the favor by bringing Shane Black into the MCU mix with Iron Man 3, and so like, again, I think that this is since we're talking about 05, I think that you cannot, I think it would be a mistake to ignore a very crucial film role, performance, actor in Shane Black's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
I love that pick. That's like so in the spirit of this category because I mean, I want my guests to pick whatever they want to pick, but I often say to them, it could really be anything. It could be, I really love that you pick something that does not have Academy prestige to it. A friend of mine saw an earlier screening of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and Shane Black was there, and he had talked about how how challenging it was because he cast not only Robert Downey Jr. but Val Kilmer, and he says like, yeah, leave it to me. I cast the junkie and the fucking asshole in my movie, but
they're both great.
And they're both great, absolutely. And I think that like he's sober. I mean, he gets sober a couple years prior to this. I don't know the exact timeline. And I think that Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, he also has a small part in Good Night and Good Luck, tying everything together. I think that Hollywood looks at that and they're like, okay, he's sort of back. He's the same guy, but he's clean. We can build a movie around him. And because I'll tie things together again, Woody Allen had said sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, he said, I wanted to work with Robert Downey. I couldn't get him insured. I have no idea what movie that was. Maybe it was Sweet and Lowdown. My mind is like bursting. Robert Downey in a Woody Allen movie would have been fucking great. Still would be great,
Agreed.
Like that's a guy who could probably take on that persona, and he can't not be his self, except for Oppenheimer, which he's terrific in. That's like one of the few things where he's not the fast talking, because Robert Downey's kind of like Sam Rockwell, where he's a terrific actor, but he's always
he's a type.
He's a type, and I think Rockwell's that way too. And I think that like Oppenheimer's kind of the sort of the exception, where it's not a role I would have put him in, but he's terrific in it. It's one of the few things he like disappears into. Chaplin, I think, is his masterpiece performance-wise. I think he disappears into that as well.
Absolutely.
That's yeah.
Listen, it was very liberating. We only really, I think, had one call before this, like about some weeks ago, just about this. Otherwise, it was just like the email with the homework,
Right.
And you were very liberating in just sort of like the idea of just like, first it started with like, something that should be nominated for, and then you're like, but not really, like just anything from the year that seems noteworthy. And again, I don't think this should have been nominated for an Academy Award or anything, but I think you cannot. I mean, like its importance to cinema is undeniable, and it's, by the way, great and rewatchable and and fun.
Yeah, it's a fun movie, and I think you're right to draw that because Marvel comes up a lot just in film discussion, whether it's negative or positive. And it really is built around one guy, which is why it worked, at least in the early going, is that it was built around a personality.
By the way, take Kiss Kiss Bang Bang out of cinema history, we might not have a Marvel in MCU.
I agree.
That could very well be a butterfly effect kind of moment.
I completely agree. I had not thought about it, but I think that's very, very interesting to think about. I'm spotlighting two screenplays from two fascinating movies with two really shitball titles. So, That might be where the great writing stopped. Although one of these is an adaptation, I think. So my first movie is Two for the Money. Do you know this movie, Billy? Two for the Money.
Jesus Christ, are you serious? By the way, we still have cable, and there was a time a few years, like very recent years, where that thing was was running on some I don't know if it was Stars or one of the
Yeah.
HBOs, where it was running like all the time. It was crazy. It was like inescapable.
So Two for the Money, aside from having a bad title, has a really terrible opening scene. But once you get past that scene, it really settles into this really entertaining groove. It was written by Dan Gilroy, and Dan Gilroy went on to write one of my favorite movies of the next decade, Nightcrawler. And his brother is Tony Gilroy, and I believe Dan Gilroy's been involved in the Andor series. And Dan Gilroy's knocked around Hollywood for a long time. I'd say Nightcrawler is his masterpiece, but he wrote this movie about 10 years before. And it's a really specific world of sports gambling. It isn't just about sports gambling. It's about like sort of like this legal loophole that the Al Pacino character exploits. And I just love movies that are about a world that I know nothing about and that are really knowledgeable about this world. Um, I think this is like a really great example of a movie's not about what it's about, but how it's about it. This is a loud Al Pacino performance, but it's kind of fun. It's like Devil's Advocate where it's loud, but like it doesn't take away from the movie. It's kind of like, yeah, this guy would be loud. It feels appropriate for it. I think it's a pretty good McConaughey performance, at least as far as like, he's very solid in it. And again, he's playing an ex-athlete. Both these guys just feel really well cast. You mentioned Cable, like that's how I stumbled upon this. It's not something I would have paid money to go and see. Its title really doesn't do it any favors, and I'm harping on it, but so I think it's a really well-written script, and the movie's fun. It's an airplane, treadmill, cable movie, if ever there was one. I think those have a place too. The other screenplay I want to talk about is The Ice Harvest, which is written by Richard Russo and Robert Benton. And this is an unassuming, quirky crime movie that really evokes Fargo in all the best ways. It's set in like a wintry landscape. It's a dark comedy. It gets violent as hell. It was directed by Harold Ramis. I think the script does a really great job.
By the way, this movie was on my list too of like sort of like outside looking in. I mentioned the three. That was my fourth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep it three, but if you told me what was the next one in my list, it was Ice Harvest.
Oh, cool.
And yeah,
so
the late great Hal Ramis's penultimate directorial effort.
Yeah, and sadly, the last time that we see John Cusack and Billy Bob Thornton in a movie together. I mean, I guess there's still time. I really like their other movie, Pushing 10, which couldn't be more different. But I think that they have like kind of, I don't know which is which, kind of a Lemon Mathau thing going. They're such specific screen personas that shouldn't go together, but go together really well. I think Thornton's role in this is much smaller, but it still works. Whereas in Pushing 10, he's in a lot more of it.
I love that it's a movie that grossed like $10 million worldwide, and I saw it in the theater.
So did I. I saw this in the theater too, and it was a real kind of zag for Harold Ramis because it was the only really kind of serious-ish movie that he ever did, and there was like a sort of a road not traveled where he could have done a Coen Brothers type thing. Because again, I keep going back to Fargo because to me, Fargo, it's not just the snow. It's just the idea that like you have a movie that's very funny but turns violent but doesn't lose its fun. And I think that's a little bit Tarantino, but I think that Fargo is the better comp here. And also just showing you this world that's that's not commonplace. It's not in a big city. So Billy, where can people find you and what have you got coming up? What have you got out?
I'm on the socials at Billy Corben. That's Corben, not the lead singer of Smashing Pumpkins. We just did this documentary, Canceled, the Paula Deen story, which premiered at the Toronto Film Festival this past September. And will hopefully be landing on a streamer near you, knock wood. And in the meantime, it's on the festival circuit. We're doing some other festivals with it in the meantime. And we're launching a new company in the new year, which I'll come back to tell you more about. But
Please.
this was a fucking joy. I never get to talk about movies. We talk politics. We talk. People have me on to talk about, obviously, to promote like our documentaries and stuff. But like you and I literally grew up, single digits, like from diapers, watching movies together on TV and on VHS. And like I very rarely get to talk about it. So this was fucking awesome, especially to get to do it with you. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being.
And of course, picking what you thought was going to be, what we all thought was going to be a difficult and challenging title, whereas I think David Sipkin got the much shorter end of the stick by having to rewatch like 10 hours worth of movies just to prepare for one podcast about one movie.
Well, so did I. I appreciate that. And in this first series, I really wanted you on it, and I felt like, without knowing exactly how you'd come down on this movie, I knew the conversation would be just fascinating. I mean, you've defended it more than I thought you would, which was great. But no, it was great having you on, and yeah, we're definitely gonna have you back.
Please try to pick something that'll piss me off more next time.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no, I'll have to fix something. You can find me on Letterboxd. It's Edward Clow. You can also find me on Instagram, which I'm not using now, but I am going to start using to promote the show. You can also find some short films I've done on Vimeo. That's it for this episode. Next episode, Michael Prince and I discuss the best picture of 2006, The Departed. Till then, looking forward to looking back.